Well, I was not expecting that. I would definitely say that WandaVision is the MCU's biggest gamble since Antman. Welcome to MythMachine. Today, we're gonna break down the first 2 episodes that just dropped on Disney Plus and look into what they could mean for the future of the MCU. Let's do it. Lots of other channels received the first 3 episodes of WandaVision for review weeks ago, but MythMachine is such a new, small channel that of course we weren't one of the lucky ones. So please subscribe and hit like so that we can work towards getting review copies to get you guys content earlier. It really does help the channel out. Wanda and Vision were always characters that I wasn't super passionate about just because we didn't ever really flesh them out as much as characters like Iron Man or Captain America. I'd even say that they fleshed out Hawkeye more than Wanda and Vision. They both do have cool backstories though. Wanda and her brother Quicksilver were experimented on by Strucker and used as weapons by Ultron, and ever since her brother's death, Wanda's had to forge her own path and cope with the fact that she's done terrible things in her past and learn how to build her own future. And Vision is basically a robot that was created by equal parts of Tony Stark, Bruce Banner, and the AI Jarvis, as well as an Infinity Stone. He's super powerful, but was still beat and defeated by Thanos. And since he wasn't snapped, he's dead as far as we know. So it's a mystery as to why he's appearing in the show and is still alive. The first episode kicks off with the classic Marvel Studios theme and title card, and it always does a great job of getting you pumped up. We then hear a brand new but also old school WandaVision theme as we see a black and white Vision and Wanda dressed to the nines as they drive home having just been married. Right off the bat, this episode really does a great job of paying homage to old shows like The Dick Van Dyke Show or I Love Lucy. Vision's the perfect husband getting ready to go to the office while Wanda's the perfect housewife using her powers to do dishes. And I really loved this opening scene. I grew up watching shows like Bewitched on Nick at Night with my cousins, and they really nailed the goofy humor and wholesome tone of those old school shows.
What do you say to silver dollar pancakes, crispy hash browns, bacon, eggs, freshly squeezed orange juice, and black coffee?
I say, oh, I don't eat food.
Well, that explains the empty refrigerator.
I also loved that they incorporate outdated filmmaking and special effects techniques from that time period. Like in those shows, you could always slightly see the wires or the cracks and seams and the tricks that they used in those old shows, and I'm glad that they kept that and didn't make it feel too polished here. And while it was kind of tough to get used to the laugh track, it really works because it's just got a lot of vintage charm. So Wanda and Vision both notice that there's a heart written on the calendar on today's date, but neither of them can remember what it signifies. This is where the mystery starts to come into play, and even though it's kind of brushed aside quickly as Vision leaves for work, you can start to feel that something might be a little off in this perfect suburban home. Wanda's nosy neighbor comes over and helps her realize that it might be her wedding anniversary that's noted on the calendar. Meanwhile, Vision realizes at work that they're supposed to have his boss, Mr. Hart, hence the heart, and his wife over for dinner that night. So Vision quickly calls Wanda and they both talk to each other, thinking that they're on the same page when in reality, Wanda's planning a romantic evening for 2, while Vision thinks she's prepping dinner for his boss and his wife. And the audience obviously knows that classic hilarity will ensue. Classic old school sitcom shenanigans, right? Oddly enough, we have a quick commercial break for an ad that's selling a toaster manufactured by Stark Industries. And we know that Wanda hated Stark Industries in her younger years, so maybe this could be a memory or a feeling from her subconscious. Could this be another hint that we may be in a dream? The boss comes over and Wanda, decked out in lingerie, has created a romantic evening and quickly has to scramble to try and prepare dinner for everyone. Once they start eating dinner, the boss starts to choke on food, and this is where it starts getting a little weird. Up until this point, the whole episode has been shot with extreme wides like it was filmed in front of a live studio audience back in the day, but here, the boss lies dying on the floor, the laugh track cuts out, and they start to use modern filmmaking angles. Close-up dolly-ins, over-the-shoulder shots. The juxtaposition to what we've been immersed in up to this point really does a great job of making this feel surreal and kind of creepy. The boss's wife begins repeating herself like a broken record, and something is seriously off. Vision ends up pulling the food out of Mr. Hart's throat, and things suddenly snap back to normal, but the audience is left with this odd feeling. The boss leaves, Wanda magically gives them both wedding rings, another jump cut special effect, and as the end card pops up, the camera dollies out and we see that the show is being watched on TV by an agent in a S.W.O.R.D facility of some sort. Notice the S.W.O.R.D logo here on this monitor. That's gonna pop up a lot more in the future. Hit like if you're a nerd and already know what S.W.O.R.D is, but stick around because we're gonna get into all that. Moving into episode 2, it starts off where Vision and Wanda wake up to the noise of something hitting the window or the side of the house outside. They can't figure out what it is. Vision mentions that some guys at work had mentioned that they'd been seeing some shady types around the neighborhood lately, but Wanda opens the window, sees a tree branch next to it, and they both assume that that's what the noise was. Much like the episode before, they brush off the weirdness, but what's really weird is that they're sleeping in separate beds. But that's just because people were really weird back then and all TV couples slept in separate beds. This is another example of them really sticking the landing with this whole period piece thing. This episode introduces a brand new animated intro that's reminiscent of other old school sitcoms like Bewitched. And I think we're gonna be getting a new intro for each episode, which will be fun to see and just shows off all the hard work and dedication that the whole team has put into really exploring all these different sitcom styles throughout history. So we pick up with the leads the next day as they're practicing a magic trick that they'll have to perform for a community talent show that night. Wanda wants it to go well so that they can fit in and everyone will feel like they're normal. Vision goes to work and Wanda hears another knock on the house. This time she walks outside and she finds a toy helicopter, but what's really strange is it's in full color and it also has that S.W.O.R.D logo on it. We know from the comics that S.W.O.R.D or S.W.O.R.D is an agency similar to S.H.I.E.L.D. Where S.H.I.E.L.D. deals with local threats, S.W.O.R.D deals with extraterrestrial or interdimensional threats. Now, I don't think that the show is going to delve into extraterrestrial threats, only because we've already done that in Guardians of the Galaxy or with, Infinity War and Endgame. What I think we're moving into is the multiverse. There have been massive rumors that this show leads directly into the next Doctor Strange film, and so I would think that we're gonna start connecting all those weird multiverse dots. Wanda's nosy neighbor stops by to walk with her to the planning committee meeting for the talent show that night, and there Wanda meets a new friend, someone who has been confirmed to be Monica Rambeau. Now, we've met Monica Rambeau as a little kid in Captain Marvel. All throughout this show, we keep getting little breadcrumbs and hints to something odd going on underneath the surface, and Monica's intro is no different. At the meeting, a radio's playing music in the background, but it begins to talk. The camera angles again begin to change, and someone breaks a glass and begins to bleed. The radio breaks and everything kind of snaps back to normal as the radio shuts off, but the audience is left with even more questions. What is really going on here? On the surface, we're watching a cute sitcom, but all the subtext and everything underneath, all those other layers that aren't just surface level, are telling us that there's a bigger story at play here, and we're just kind of slowly burning through this intro. In this episode, we get another commercial where we cut to a guy who is basically selling a watch, and this watch is made by Strucker. Now, if you remember, Strucker is the guy who experimented on Wanda and her brother Quicksilver in Age of Ultron, so this is definitely bubbling up from Wanda's subconscious, and I bet we'll see more things from her past in the commercials we get in the future episodes. One other thing that I noticed was that the Hydra logo was on the watch, so is this in reference to her past as well, or is it a hint to the return of Hydra in the future? Vision stops by to see some work friends at the neighborhood watch, and they offer him a piece of gum that gets lodged in his gears, which kind of mucks things up for him and has basically the same effect as a normal person getting drunk. So Vision shows up to the talent show both late and drunk and starts using his powers to do real magic tricks. Wanda has to work hard to add in ropes and make the magic appear to be fake, but the town is ultimately impressed and they win the award for Best Comedy Act. And Paul Bettany's performance here was great. I really loved it, and it reminded me of his role in A Knight's Tale, which I also really enjoyed.
I missed my introduction!
Both actors did a really great job of just committing to their roles here, and you can tell that they did a bunch of research into, kind of the little mannerisms and inflections that the actors had back on those old sitcoms, and it really, really shows, just brings a whole nother level of believability to this show, even though the whole time we're watching it, we know, yeah, there's something weird going on here, and we're actually watching a show within a show. So Wanda removes the gum from Vision, they go back home, and suddenly they realize that Wanda has a baby bump. In the comics, they have two twin boys who become mutants named Speed and Wiccan. So could this be the introduction of mutants in the MCU? This may be how we start to introduce future characters like Wolverine and the other X-Men. Just before Wanda and Vision kiss, they hear another crash outside. The camera angles change and they go outside the house, and we're no longer watching a sitcom, as a beekeeper with another S.W.O.R.D logo comes up out of a manhole, bees swarming around him. He looks at Wanda straight in the eye, and it's as though she knows exactly who he is and why he's there, but defiantly she says no. And all of a sudden, time rewinds to the moment where she realized she was pregnant, and everything's normal again. She kisses Vision, and his face turns to color, then the whole world turns to color, and it feels as though we've moved forward a decade in the sitcom period piece timeline thing. As the credits begin to roll, we hear the message from the radio again.
Who's doing the C, Wanda? Wanda.
Overall, I like it. I don't love it, but I have this thing with shows that I like to call the 2-episode rule. It's hard for some shows to get all of the setup they need to in the pilot or the first episode without having way too much exposition or suspension of disbelief. So even if I'm not fully on board with a show after its first episode, I always give it a second shot. If I'm not hooked by the end of that second episode, I bail. Because they dropped the first 2 episodes together here, I'm gonna give WandaVision a little extra leeway and count this as the first episode. So I'll hold final judgment on whether or not I'll stick around for the whole series until I've seen episode 3. Because they've announced 9 episodes, I think that the first 3 episodes will be essentially the first act of the story, the next 3 episodes the second act, and the last 3 obviously the third and final climax. In my opinion, I don't think Disney and Marvel are doing themselves any favors in releasing this show week to week. It definitely feels like a Netflix model of dropping everything at once might have been a better option for this show, and that it would have worked better as a continuous binge. I guess we'll see. I'm intrigued by the mystery, I enjoy the chemistry and charm of the characters and actors, and I haven't been let down by Kevin Feige and company yet, so I have enough faith to stick around. For now. But I wouldn't blame other people for bailing after these first 2 episodes. It just doesn't have enough mystery yet for some people to hang on. However, I do absolutely think that by the end of the season, we'll look back at the slow burn beginning to the mystery and appreciate what it ends up building up to. My prediction is that this is all some sort of dream or something happening within Wanda's mind and she's being trapped within it. The marketing said dreaming this Friday instead of streaming this Friday, which I think could end up being a big hint. We know that Wanda has the ability to warp perception and control people's thoughts, make them see visions, no pun intended. So is somebody turning her powers against her? Who's doing this to her? I've got the same questions that the guy on the radio does. If I had to guess, I'd say there's a really good chance that it's the villain Nightmare from the comics. As I said before, we know that this show will lead directly into Doctor Strange's next film, Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. So this show could be setting up Nightmare as the villain for that movie as well. Again, this may be a huge gamble for Marvel and we'll see if it pays off. It's supposed to kick off a whole new phase of storytelling through streaming, and they've decided to start by stepping way outside of their norm. But you know what? I respect them for wanting to shake things up, and I trust them enough to see where this goes. Even though it's off to a slow start, I thought the filmmaking and commitment to staying true to that old school sitcom-y style worked super well, and I'm also excited to see how the mystery unfolds and what it sets up for the future of the MCU. I mean, you just know that it's going to connect to so many things. While I hope it picks up the pace, Marvel has never been known to drag its feet, so I'm sure we're in for a wild ride over the next few weeks, and it will be fun to travel through time and revisit old forms of sitcoms and TV. I'll be reviewing episode 3 next week as soon as it drops, so be sure to subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss that. But in the meantime, check out my video here where I go in depth into why the Marvel Cinematic Universe is worthy of being called one of the greatest myths of our day and age. Thanks so much for watching, guys. I really do appreciate it, and I'll see you around.